Hi everybody, I'm Greg Fishel, and this is a special weather commentary with me sharing a few observations and opinions with you about the situation with Hurricane Helene and how it affected the western part of North Carolina. And there have been some correspondences with me and other people that have asked the question, why was this catastrophe not forecast? Okay, which is a fair question, okay? Now, the thing is, it's not like this system was a complete surprise. In fact, myself and many other meteorologists hammered home the idea for days and days and days that the impact of this storm would be far worse in the mountains of North Carolina than it would be anywhere else in the state, okay? So that was well forecast and well stated well ahead of time. However, predicting an unprecedented event or a nearly unprecedented event is no easy task. There are a number of systems, they can be hurricanes, they can be tornadoes, they can be snowstorms, that have the potential to be either unprecedented or nearly unprecedented, but very, very few of them ever realize that full potential. And that's why we have the worst storm ever or nearly the worst storm ever, because if they were all the same, then you wouldn't be able to say that any one of them was the worst, okay? So if we mention, those of us that are in operational forecasting, if we mention the potential for every system that had that potential to be one of the worst storms in the history of mankind, what we would do, in my opinion, is completely desensitize the public to taking any of this seriously, because most of the time that potential would not be realized by definition, okay? And so if you hear people talking about, oh, this could be the worst storm ever, and then a month later, this could be the worst storm ever, and a month later, this could be the worst storm ever, and none of them are, then what do you think is going to happen? Okay, people are going to say, oh, they talk about this worst storm ever all the time, and it never turns out to be as bad as they think it is, so I'm going to just ignore this from this point forward, okay? And then, if you have a storm that is one of the worst ever, then those people are not prepared. It's very similar to what I have tried to get across for years with tornado warnings. That even in a day where there's a huge tornado outbreak, the chance of one of those really bad tornadoes going directly over your house is minimal, okay? And you can roll the dice, and most times you'll get away with it, all right? But if by chance that EF5 goes right over your house and you're not prepared, pardon my French, you are screwed, all right? And so what I always tried to tell people to do is go to your basement, go to your interior closet, whatever that safe place in your house or building is, and if the EF5 doesn't go directly over top of you, what have you lost? Maybe 20 to 30 minutes of your life to make sure that you gave yourself the best chance to survive a potentially catastrophic situation, okay? We wish we were good enough to be able to say, oh, this tornado is going to touch down at 213 North Main Street and it is going to lift at 572 South Main Street. So if you live along that line, you're going to get hit hard and nobody else will. Breaking news, we ain't that good, okay? We are always going to warn more people than will actually be affected, because it is impossible to make, at least at this stage of the game, to make a weather forecast that is that specific. This is what cracks me up about television stations that say, we can predict the weather right down to your backyard. That is such a bunch of poppycock, it isn't even funny, okay? Now, if you have a widespread weather system where everybody in 3 states is getting the same thing, yeah, then you can say we can predict the weather right down to your backyard, because your backyard is just like everybody else's backyard, okay? But when it comes to isolated situations, like, really small scale stuff like, downbursts and tornadoes and that kind of stuff, no, nobody can do that, okay? And even if you are looking at street level radar, the radar beam is hitting that storm aloft, and if it's not exactly a straight up and down storm, okay, or like the funnel cloud is not straight up and down, it's going to be off, okay? So that's all that's all to get your attention and to try to impress you, and there's nothing real about it. So if you ever hear that, just sort of put the earmuffs on and forget about it. But anyways, my point is that if you live in mountainous terrain and a tropical cyclone is headed your way, and it doesn't have to be a Cat 4. I mean, there have been tropical depressions that have dumped 30 inches of rain and flooded out, places really, really badly. But if you have a tropical cyclone moving toward an area of high terrain, the way I would recommend you deal with that is you assume the worst, okay? Because you've got an incredibly moist environment, you are forcing it to ascend rapidly over higher terrain, and you're gonna dump rain out of that. You're gonna dump a lot of rain out of it, okay? Now, if you get 10 inches or 20 inches or 30 inches, those are the details that can make the difference between it being the worst ever and one of the worst ever, or simply bad, okay? But no one should have been surprised that the effects of this storm in the mountains were bad, okay? The fact that it was, again, this catastrophic event is one of those things where any tropical cyclone has that potential, okay? But what I worry about is if we mention that potential with every tropical cyclone, and most times it didn't turn out to be that bad, then we're going to have exactly the opposite effect with the public that we want. We don't want to desensitize them to warnings. We want them to pay close attention to them. And I think we would achieve exactly the opposite if indeed we mentioned this quote unquote potential with every tropical cyclone heading toward a mountainous region. So there is more than science that plays into this. There is psychology, and you don't have to be a psychology major to appreciate this particular element as it ties into weather forecasting. So my advice is that if you live in a mountainous area and a tropical cyclone is headed your way and somebody's telling you that the impacts there are going to be worse than they're going to be anywhere else around you, then I would count on it being the worst. And if it's not, don't be mad, be thankful, okay? And if it is that bad, then you've given yourself the best chance to avoid a catastrophe in your own personal life, which would be losing it, okay? So that's my take on that. I am certainly not saying that any of us, myself included, exactly predicted how bad this was going to be. We didn't, okay? But I want you to understand where we're coming from a communication standpoint, that any of these storms have that kind of potential, and very, very few ever realize it. And my thoughts and prayers and hearts go out to everybody that has been adversely affected out there. And I just hope that in the future that, that people will take tropical cyclones really, really seriously and get out, because this kind of thing can happen, and it can happen again, and it can happen again in your lifetime. So we all need to be prepared for that. All right, folks, that is it for now. That is my commentary on Hurricane Helene and the effects that it had on western North Carolina. I hope that makes sense. That is it for now, and I'll talk to you again real soon. See you later.